Welcome to another installment of Where Was God? When you sit down and decide to write a book about where was God, and you spent night after night in front of God's throne asking questions, of course, it's only a matter of time before the question comes up, why Donald Trump? Why did God choose Trump? Well, without going through a full view of the life of Donald Trump, let's take a look at some of the attributes that would qualify him as the leader of a new movement in the U.S. And it's not a new movement, it's something that's been sitting there waiting to boil over, and every American patriot and every working American. Well, one of the things is it's refreshing to see a president actually fulfilling campaign promises. Not to mention exceeding some of those promises. Border wall was one campaign promise I took a look at, and I wasn't into politics before the 2020 election at all. I didn't pay attention to news. I didn't want to listen to any of the people that were running, campaigning. I took a look online, looked at what they stood for, looked at what they were for, what they were against, and made a decision. Usually walking into the ballot box and looking at the names and trying to decide who was likely to steal the least. To me, that was voting. But I didn't consider that promise of building a border wall serious at all. But I'll tell you, once I saw it taking shape, I started paying attention to it. One of the things that we saw is Democrats were taking that border wall to court time after time. Well, most politicians, if it went to court, they would just say, hey, I tried, throw up their hands and play the blame game. Well, obviously that didn't happen with Trump, because he fought every single one of those court cases time after time after time and won every single court case. Well, another thing that came to light was Trump's knowledge and background on the project. Although he never built a border wall, he had some experience with buildings, foundations, and some other stuff. So he would go out there, take a look at it, take a look at the plans, do some suggestions. He actually saved money on the border wall, working with the best experts and putting the best people in charge. Too often what we see with politicians is politicians with absolutely no experience trying to micromanage every single project, and what does that do? It winds up costing more money. And we all know what that means. When we see wasted tax dollars, we know politicians are getting their cut. We didn't see that with Trump. Okay, one of the other attributes, the first one that I recognized in Trump was he was a master negotiator. I negotiate for a living. My dad was a master negotiator. And so I really focused my attention on trying to pay attention to Trump only to see his negotiating skills and actions. And you have to really be in tune with negotiating to see when the full package was demanded and what the plan was to actually get. You know, there's in negotiations, there's a lot of give and take. In the long run, Trump had an excellent record of announcing what he wanted and getting the vast majority of it. He wasn't afraid to go public with what he was demanding because he knew what he was going to get. And if you know anything about negotiating, that first announcement or first demand is always exaggerated. Well, the key point is, every agreement Trump negotiated was far better than any of the previous agreements government had with any other nation or association or anything. I would say if God was going to choose anyone, they would need the qualities of communication and the ability to negotiate. Even though we know God always has everything in control and God always gets his way, it's always good to have a good negotiator on the spot to work through. That's got to be a major plus. I mean, look at Daniel. He was able to get Nebuchadnezzar and the other people to do things that they really didn't want to do. Well, okay, you can go back that and study that on your own. But what I would suggest is you actually read or watch some biographies on Donald Trump. One of them that I watched showed Donald Trump growing up with his father and learning the real estate investment business. Now that branched out into buying and reconstructing high-end real estate. You see, one of the portions, the biggest part of the American dream, is parents always want their kids to go far further than what they were able to achieve. Trump did that. I mean, he went from, basically his father was a slumlord, and Trump went into high-end real estate, the motels, all of that stuff. And another thing I noticed was his first wife, Ivana Trump, and her interactions with people working on a project to rebuild the Grand Hyatt Hotel. Ivana had a way of dealing with people in a project, and I can see that Donald learned a lot of dealing with people from Ivana. I always thought that he should have stayed married to Ivana because she was the one God put in his life to learn from. Ivana had a knack for recognizing talent in people, collecting ideas, and having everyone working on a project all in the same direction, working for a common goal. And those were talents that we see Donald Trump picked up, he grasped onto, and he applied them in all his business dealings, and he applied them to being president of the United States. Trump carried those concepts into the White House. He also had the knowledge and experience to choose and bring in the best minds into his cabinet and in every phase of government and its interaction with the American businesses all across the nation. Whenever a problem came up, Trump called in the best minds America had to offer. He had meetings gathering all the possible ideas, came up with a plan, and initiated that plan. And in every case, Trump played the leader. He got all the ideas, he put all the ideas together, took the best ideas, put it into action, and took full responsibility. Well, they worked. If you look at the problems that Trump and his staff worked on, I mean, let's just make a short list. They worked on government control and regulation of businesses, worked on foreign affairs, trade deals, taxation, transportation, crime, and a list of, almost endless list of other issues. The results showed unprecedented growth in the economy, lower taxes, and lower prices for consumers. In addition to that, Trump also ended a number of welfare programs all over the world. Money that the government was just giving away to countries. What Trump did is expose the good old boy system of government operating across the world where only the elite benefited from grant programs. You never seen anybody. I mean, if poor people actually benefited from any of those government programs that were introduced, it would the woke news would be all over it, broadcasting it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, those never worked. So Trump cut billions in aid And what did he do? He turned that savings over to people that were building the economy. One of the examples is farmers. Well, farmers are always hit. Farmers are the backbone of America. Without farmers, we wouldn't have a country. We wouldn't be eating. We'd all starve to death. So why were farmers always hit with the highest tax hikes, the highest tariffs, and the most amount of government controls? Imagine being in a business to where you're actually supplying the blood flow for the entire economy in the entire country, and you're treated worse than the dirt that you're putting the seeds in. Well, of course, we have to say God doesn't choose people based on their skills and qualifications. Well, that's true to an extent. We only looked at the people Jesus chose. All of them had different attributes. Well, they all had one attribute in common. The moment they left their nets, their homes, their families, they followed Jesus 100%, no questions asked. Now I got to ask, did Trump have that quality? Well, we have to admit, no president in U.S. history has ever been investigated more than President Trump. They've looked at every aspect of his life and never uncovered a single detail or crime they could level on. There were 2 impeachments. The second involved a phone call. Well, during that hearing, that one quickly fell apart. If you remember that hearing, one person heard the phone call in a restaurant, another one heard the phone call on the street, another one heard the phone call in Air Force One, another one heard the phone call in the Oval Office. And, what did that remind you of? Jesus' trial. No 2 witnesses could agree on a single detail. So what happened in Jesus' trial? The high priest called Jesus guilty anyway, which is exactly what Nancy Pelosi did. Even though the trial fell apart, Pelosi pushed for a guilty verdict. Well, that parallel caused me to pay better attention to later events as they began to unfold. What happened after that? January 6th trials. There was no evidence. There was no armed insurrection. All of that stuff, all of the evidence was exaggerated beyond belief, and realistically, it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to take what actually happened in the January 6th trial and apply it to what happened in Jesus' trial. Witnesses were completely useless. Charges were completely baseless. But guess what? They all followed an established script. You don't think the priests and the Pharisees had a script before they arrested Jesus? They did. And guess what? You look at January 6th, they had that script written before January 6th, 2021. Long before. They had this planned out a long time. Well, you can see God's hand in another trial. And Jesus is always going to have a few words of advice on trials that we're going to be facing. Jesus went through it. Well, another thing about Donald Trump is he seems to be happy with the money he's made and doesn't have any goals to get richer and richer and richer and become a trillionaire. Most rich people never have enough. Trump tends to donate a great deal of his time and his money to charities that help small people, like every good representative should do, but it's really, really rare in politics. Well, since running for office in 2016, Trump brought out the best in politicians who, for lack of a better term, were closet patriots. It only took one man, one leader, to talk about putting the U.S. on the right path to attract the attention and dedication of dozens of political patriots and millions of American patriots. That's what the left really fears about Trump. Trump's patriotism has spread to over 130 countries. People all over the world now have the courage to stand up to their career politicians who have been cornering the wealth and never allowing that wealth to trickle down to the average citizen. Here we refer to that as the big steal. Well, when we see an idea, the concept of freedom and equality spread from a series of rallies. I don't know if you've ever been to a Trump rally, but that idea and concept spread across the country, and then it turned into a worldwide concept. So we know God had his hand in that. Trump didn't stop displaying his dedication after leaving office. And now we know Trump is running for re-election in 2024. Now this is exactly what Jesus saw in the disciples he chose. They never gave up, they never quit, they never stopped learning. Of course, we know that the majority of Trump's followers are Christians, and they all follow the golden rule of live and let live. That's what makes patriots patriots. We just want to be left alone and live our lives the way we feel is right, and we're willing to let everybody else make their own decision within the law. We respect other religions, other Christian denominations, and we all know, the real patriots know, you never force your religious beliefs on other people. We find common ground and work for that. Well, you got to look at the fact Trump's base is made up of well over 300 Christian denominations, and they never agreed on all the doctrines established in those churches. But Trump was able to unite all those different members of all those different denominations under the banner of freedom as guaranteed under the Constitution, which would make the authors of the Constitution proud. See, that was, if you read about how the Constitution was formed, one of the major problems that they were facing was, how do we write up a Constitution that all these different religions were going to agree to? If you go back in American history, you'll find out that all of the colonies were Baptist over here, another religion over here, another religion over here, another church over there, and they had to bring all those original 13 colonies together under the banner of freedom without offending any one of them. So, but it'd be difficult to find another man with Trump's knowledge, experience, and money and dedication to forge a new Patriot Party. And you know, it does take money. It takes a man that's made a name for himself, or a woman. Some of the most outspoken and bravest members of the Republican Party are women. Take, for instance, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's one of them. And if we look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, we know there's like this vast distance between her and any of the other patriots in the Republican Party that come in second place. Well, that's my opinion. Well, when Jesus chose his disciples, he knew each brought their own personalities, each were able to effectively reach out to a different class of people. That's what's known as allowing those under you to use their skills and personality to do their jobs. That's where Trump really shined. after appointing someone to a task, they knew they were in control and responsible for fulfilling the task they were given. Well, that's rare in business. I know we all work for companies to where you're just micromanaged to death with a manager that really doesn't have the qualifications, and that manager is afraid to see you accomplish what they're not able to accomplish. So they micromanage you and actually wind up destroying and running the company into the ground to save face. Well, that wasn't true for Trump. If anybody could do the job better than himself, he'd just let him go. You're in charge. Well, that's not standard practice in business, and it's not standard practice in the government. And another thing about Trump is his memory. He's able to match a face with a name. You know, you watch him speak, he just remembers names like you wouldn't believe. Of course, a lot of those are written speeches, but remember, someone has to remember all of that stuff and put all those little details together to write it out so that it could go smoothly during a speech. Well, what other qualifications does Trump bring to the table? Well, what about his spiritual qualities? We got to ask that. No one ever brings up Trump's spiritual life or talks about his spiritual qualifications, and maybe that's by design. If Trump leaned one way too far or another way too far with his spiritual beliefs, he'd be offending someone. So that's kind of ground. It's common ground that you really have to, can we say, walking on eggshells or staying away from. But by not getting too deeply into spiritual matters, that's actually showing respect for other people's beliefs. If we look at the New Testament, we find out Jesus never leaned in one direction or another direction or did anything that turned people away with different beliefs. Well, we can go back and look at all the questions that Jesus gave answers to that nobody could argue with, but, that's a different matter altogether. Anyway, that's one of the qualities that's difficult to explain. It's impossible to pinpoint, but it's a quality you gotta find in people that are gonna lead something like a movement or let's say lead the most powerful nation in the world. Trump united, Biden divides. It can sum it up that way. Anyway, the ability to not step on toes is a quality you either have or you don't have. Well, a lot of people share that quality, but it seems whenever someone is in charge or gets the power, that quality goes right out the window. And when we're talking about spirituality, it has to be a major component in any U.S. president. Overall, faith has been important, but that faith has always been directed so it applies to all walks of Christian life as well as other religions. Overall, I'd say when you look at why God chose Trump, we can see a short list of business-related qualifications followed by a long list of other minor qualifications shared by most people. God needed an example that looked natural. Someone who conveys the idea that each of us has our unique qualifications to get involved and contribute at different levels. I can't ever see God settling for anything less. So, anyway, if you got comments, go ahead, comment below. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share. And subscribe. So I got a whole book with 20-some chapters in this, in Where Was God? And we're going to take a look at all kinds of different aspects and events and levels of government and what we saw happening and where we are today now in 2023.